So absolutely enormous Warhammer 40k lore updates today. We've got the secrets of Vashtorr's plans, Lionel Johnson fighting Angron, and the thing that Vashtorr's been building turns out to be wholly unexpected. Let's talk through all the lore updates from Arks of Omen Book 5. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today we're back for a rather fun lore update. In this one there's going to be massive spoilers for Arks of Omen the Lion, so if you're going to buy this and read it for yourself firsthand, feel free to tune out now. Games Workshop's Arks of Omen series is reaching a dramatic conclusion. I must admit this book has the vast majority of the plot of the series in my opinion, and we actually finally get some answers to some of the big questions that were posed at the start of the series. So far the whole premise has been Vashtorr and Abaddon building a great key for a massive super weapon that the Imperium isn't going to like. The Dark Angels have part of it on the rock, and he's luring them into a conflict where he can hopefully get it off them, and then we'll finally find out what this is all about. First up, the book opens with the Blood Angels and the Lion, where it seems that when we last met up with them, the Blood Angels seem to have acquired the Primarch of the Dark Angels. He's casually just on their ship sparring with some of his friendly knights, the Blood Angels perhaps being rather in awe that they found a new loyalist Primarch returned to the galaxy. Kind of annoyingly, it doesn't really explain how and why he actually awakens in the first place. The last we knew of him, he was asleep in the rock, tended to by the Watchers in the Dark following his duel with Luther. At this point, when we're seeing him again, he's been active in the galaxy for really quite some time, travelling from path to path with a new and mysterious forest magic type ability that he has to jump from world to world. He seems to have acquired himself some sort of unnatural semi-warp travel, apparently akin to travelling in the webway somehow. He's been using this power to tread distant paths on backwater worlds, hunting down the fallen Dark Angels, and then when he meets them, he assesses them. If they've been tainted by chaos, then they get executed. If not, then they're given the chance to see the error of their ways and join his redeemed knights. I guess as Primarch of the Legion, he has the authority to do so, whereas the rest of the Dark Angels chapter aren't so forgiving. I don't know whether his actual awakening will be covered in that Lion Son of the Forest book that's going to be coming out next week. I'd hope that it might tell us how and why he got out from the rock and got out and about into the galaxy again. Or I guess the whole waking up thing might just be hand-waved away, it's saying that he's been back for a long time. It's just that no one's noticed as he's been keeping himself to himself. He was discovered by the Blood Angels when they came across an Ark of Omen that appeared to have been purged of chaos. It had some telltale ethereal plant life left behind from the Lion's travel, and then managed to track him down and formally meet up with him. Under the guidance of the newly returned Primarch, Dante has been marshalling a great force across the Imperium Nihilus, bringing together a vast amount of Imperial might for a conflict that the Primarch knows is going to be brewing. Speaking of which, when we last left them, the Dark Angels had basically just been attacked by Vashtorr. His demonic followers and Space Marine Alliance basically managed to penetrate the rock, and was on the cusp of getting access to the thing that he was looking for when Be'lakor showed up to basically thwart his plans out of spite. From that conflict, the Dark Angels had taken a good number of prisoners, Vashtorr deliberately having planted information in a good number of them to guide them to the Idolatros system within the Somnium Stars, and to tell the Dark Angels that that was where Vashtorr was hiding out. Azrael and the forces of the Unforgiven are pretty certain that this will be a trap, but still decide that it's necessary to take any chance to pursue Vashtorr, a demon that knows far too many of their secrets, it would seem. Their plan is to gather absolutely overwhelming force, an enormous force of Dark Angel successor chapters, and then strike on multiple fronts all at once, so it's not possible for any one maneuver to dispatch the entire lot of them. All the major Dark Angels characters and the major successor chapters are gathered together. They gather an enormous force of the First Legion, really not far from full Legion strength, a vast array of hooded and robed Space Marine might. They plan their assault on the Somnium Stars, with the successor chapters directed mainly to outlying systems, and the Rock and the primary fleet will be striking at the heart, where there's an enormous energy signature that they believe to be Vashtorr. When they arrive, battle is joined against Vashtorr's Void forces. They encounter an Ark of Omen called the Netherworld Blade, and despite outnumbering the force, it does a surprising amount of damage, with powerful augmented weaponry concocted by Vashtorr, drawing power off the Warp Rift. The Dark Angel's fleet overcomes and destroys it, but takes a fair amount of casualties. As they near the centre of the system, the rock starts to malfunction, many systems going haywire that haven't been working for a long time, and as they get to the centre of the energy signature, they realise why this is the case, and the thing that Vashtorr is building becomes apparent. Here it's revealed that the thing that Vashtorr has been making is none other than the reforged world of Caliban itself, the ancient homeworld of the Dark Angels, a shadowy forest world overrun with monsters, broken in the days of the Horus Heresy as the Dark Angels bombarded it and scattered throughout the warp. Many of the fleets of Arks of Omen have been gathering fragments and relics of lost Caliban, and it seems that he's found enough bits of it to more or less put the planet back together, though they've been assembled in a new and rather horrific form. Far from being a world of twisted forests now, Caliban has become a twisted demonic forge world, rechristened Wyrmwood by the Archifane. Burned forests are split between great cogs and machinery rippling below the planet's surface, and the whole planet is a nightmarish mass of machinery, a demon world worthy of the demigod of the Forge himself. The Dark Angels don't know why he's decided to put Caliban back together like this, but they're certainly not too happy about it at the desecration of their homeworld. The Unforgiven fly into a collective rage and launch an enormous collective assault against the planet, determined to purge whatever foul machinations have so perverted their homeworld. Azrael's primary assault force lands at the focal point of the planet, a great warp signature that appears to be emanating from a palace of twisted machinery, logically assuming that this is probably Vashtorr, and they can confront and defeat him once and for all. Despite the enormous amount of Dark Angels' might that they're bringing to bear on the planet, the defenders really are quite fierce. The Dark Angels are assaulted by legions of Dark Mechanicus forces and twisted demons, basically an entire planet worth of Vashtorr followers and quite a lot of demons of the various other Chaos deities. I kind of feel like with the heavy mention of Dark Mechanicum type forces, it likely has yet more chance that these could be coming back to Warhammer 40k in model form at some point. I'm sure a lot of people would very much like an army of technological horrors to go alongside Vashtorr the Archifane. As well as the defenders, the planet itself is also extremely hostile to the invaders, a great number of technological traps and machinations that slay many of the Dark Angels and their allies. They breach the palace and expect to find and confront Vashtorr, but that turns out not to be the case. At the centre of the palace, Vashtorr appears to have anticipated them, and it turns out that he's not there at all. Instead, someone seems to have orchestrated an entire warband of World Eaters, cult space marines at the height of a great blood ritual, and as the Dark Angels arrive, Angron bursts into real space once more, following him being blasted back there after he destroyed the Coral engine. This isn't exactly great news for the assault force, and Angron and the World Eaters charge the Dark Angels' lines, Angron cutting down mighty heroes left, right and centre. It turns out that Abaddon and Vashtorr are actually in reserve in a fleet right up in the void. Vashtorr's primary goal is to get the artifact off the rock, and now the Dark Angels have gone planetside, this is the best chance to do so. Their combined armada attacks the Dark Angels fleet, all while Angron is keeping the Dark Angels amused on the planet's surface. While that happens, Vashtorr plans to take the last part of the key from the rock. At this point we finally get some explanation as to what this mysterious key that Vashtorr's been looking for is, and as I've seen a fair few people speculating online, it does appear that the relic that he wants on the rock is actually a powerful relic that we already knew about, a sinister and ancient sentient warp engine known as the T'Chaka engine. This thing's an ancient sentient navigational device, possibly made by the Old Ones very deep into 40k's history, and as per its appearance in a couple of books before, we know that it's part of a trio of devices that have godlike powers when combined. The engine, just while it's on its own, has some of the best warp travel possible without the need for the Astronomicon. Lionel Johnson himself managed to secure and make good use of it during the Horus Heresy, and since this time it's been used by the Dark Angels to navigate the rock and allow the shadowy fortress monastery of the Dark Angels to turn up in unexpected places and not be traced by their foes. This trio of Dark Angels relics was the subject for a previous set of stories, where basically the Fallen started to combine them and try and open a great warp rift, but Azrael wound up stopping them. It turns out that Vashtorr's plan and his key is basically the unification of these three artifacts, and all mounted in a great world engine, and the combined whole will be a technological marvel of devastating proportions, and in itself kind of a weapon in its own right. Supposedly the combination of these three objects puts together essentially a device that the Old Ones used to make the webway, basically a somewhat safe and stable interdimensional highway that the Eldar make great use of. It's much more superior and powerful than warp travel for the most part, and it's generally not possible to create or destroy large parts of it, unless apparently you have this device all unified. As per the previous prophecy that we had in the Arks of Omen, this key will open a great lock. The lock apparently sounds like it's a great vault left by the Old Ones, with some enormous weapons perhaps dating back to the War in Heaven, the great conflicts that these ancient beings had against the Necrons and their Catan allies. Certainly seems plausible that things from this sort of 40k history could be far more powerful than just about anything that any faction could field at the moment. Then while the star battle is raging, relief for the Loyalist arrives in Dante and the Lion. Lionel Johnson guides the great fleet of the Blood Angels to the conflict, and Dante hails the combined forces of the Dark Angels, initially being very blunt and standoffish, not wanting to expose their secrets, as this whole operation was supposed to be to quietly destroy a major threat to the Legion and the history of many of them falling to chaos. Dante then follows this up with just letting them know that he also happens to have their Primarch in tow, and that makes the Dark Angels lighten up a bit. Dante and his Blood Angels forces are dispatched planetside to assist Azrael, who is fighting the World Eaters. His fleet engages Vashtorr and Abaddon's one, and the Lion disappears with his mysterious forest walking, along with his redeemed fallen knights. All of this seems to come just too late to prevent Vashtorr's schemes though. Vashtorr uses his Ark of Omen sacrificially, just ramming it directly into the main Dark Angel's fleet, an enormously powerful vessel that just destroys the nearest light crit ships near him, and it gets near enough to the rock that Vashtorr can strike. This time, rather than using some sort of conventional assault to land on the rock and breach the defences normally, I feel like Vashtorr gets a bit of a hand wave to move through the rock systems with some sort of techno magic, and then appear exactly where he needs to be, in the room that houses the T'Chulcha. Sort of wonder why he didn't do this the first time round, to be honest, if that was in his capabilities, but I guess the result would have been the same if he'd led a small boarding force and just slaughtered his way through until he got there. When he reaches the engine, he has a short conversation with it. It's a strange sentient device that can communicate through a sort of undead corpse. He talks with it and offers to reunite it with the Plague Heart and the Ouroboros, the other two parts of the trio of relics. The device accepts with a single word yes, and Vashtorr retreats to it to the planet of Wyrmwood to put them all together. As the relics are combined, the planet begins to activate, great cogs turn, and entire mechanical landmasses shift, causing great death and destruction both to the Space Marines planet side and also most of Vashtorr's followers as well. Descending from the heavens, the golden and red armoured forces of the Blood Angels jump down to take out Angron and the World Eaters, who seem to thoroughly have the Dark Angels on the back foot at this point, pressing them backwards and killing a great number of them. While the rest of the chapter engages the World Eaters, Dante and his Sanguinary Guard fight against Angron, though this doesn't exactly go particularly well, Angron cutting down one after another of the Sanguinary Guard and casting down Dante, just about to deliver the finishing blow. Then some green mist descends and some forest magic things happen, the Lion intervenes and blocks Angron's strike. The two former brothers not really wasting many words on introductions, Angron's a bit of a frothing maniac, and the pair begin a great fight, dueling through Vashtorr's palace of machines as the world begins to change around them. As the demigods fight, Azrael retreats with Dante. The Dark Angels and the Blood Angels are both on the back foot now, being overcome with hordes of Mechanicum and demons issuing from every surface in the planet. Rather than fighting to overcome and destroy, they're now just fighting to survive, having taken some massive losses from the World Eaters. The redeemed fallen knights help out, though tensions are pretty high between them and the Dark Angels. Azrael and friends just aren't really willing to accept that they're truly the good guys yet. I guess at least not until Lionel Johnson gives them a stern talking to, I suppose. As the Primarchs duel, Angron becomes increasingly more enraged and careless due to the Lion fighting on the defensive and occasionally hiding from him. When the opening presents itself, the Lion runs him through with fealty, and then as Angron reels from the blow, L. Johnson delivers the finishing blow with the Emperor's shield, smashing the thing straight through Angron's face and exploding his immaterial form, returning him to the warp once more. Angron's basically immortal though, as a demon. He now materializes back into the material realm really quite quickly indeed. He's gone for now, but it's only going to be a temporary respite. The fight certainly takes its toll on L. Johnson though. It's no small thing to subdue a demon Primarch. With the Blood Angels and Dark Angels retreating, he realizes that the battle is lost. He himself is utterly spent, and sounds a retreat. The combined forces take heavy casualties as they fight their way back to the drop zone, casting down a good number of traitors and heretics on their way as well. Azrael and the Lion return back to the rock, Dante to his fleet. Caliban, now Wyrmwood, has basically become a fully active demonic engine capable of smashing through the webway, and basically it's a straight up chaos victory. Vashtorr and Abaddon are triumphant. As for the aftermath, from the Loyalist perspective, they've taken heavy casualties but no major character deaths. I guess one of the bigger losses for the Dark Angels is that T'Chulcha engine. I guess the rock isn't going to be moving quite as freely around the galaxy as it once was. It would have been good to see a little bit more interaction between Lionel Johnson and his sons now they're reunited, but the book doesn't go heavily into that in any big way. The Primarch is back with his Legion though, sets the stage for some interesting things going on from now, particularly how they interact with the Fallen from here on. I guess they might be forced to accept a few Fallen Angels into their ranks if the line declares them redeemed. For the Forces of Chaos, it's basically an Abaddon and Vashtorr victory. They've collected their MacGuffins and piled them all together into a great key. They now have an enormous engine that's capable of creating new webway, destroying old webway, and basically doing warp travel greater than ever before. It's an enormously powerful tool just in itself, and I guess it could certainly be used as a weapon in their own right, but their goal now seems to be to find this lock and uncover a god tier super weapon with which to end the Imperium. Abaddon calls the combined creation the Dissonance Engine, and I'm sure it'll pop up in 40k lore in the future. Abaddon does speculate, though, that while they have gained a great victory, it does now appear that there's another player on the Loyalist side, in both the Lion and Guilliman, to hold the line. It does maybe shift the balance of power a little bit in the 41st millennium. Finally, at the end of the book, there's a bit of an inquisitorial teaser regarding Inquisitor Kotias, who apparently has been monitoring the entire conflict, and has got his hands on a whole bunch of secrets that I'm sure the Dark Angels would rather he wouldn't. He knows that the Lion's back, and there's been an enormous Chaos win, and the book ends kind of cryptically with him saying that he's going to be deploying a whole bunch of inquisitorial assets, though maybe isn't very specific as to what they are. Maybe it just seems a little bit strange that if some of the greatest armies in the Imperium aren't enough to put paid to Vashtorr, I kind of wonder what the Inquisition might really cook up. I suppose they might have some super weapons lying about for a rainy day. Could maybe foreshadow some new models, I suppose, as well, if they are taking a focus on the Inquisition. I feel like a new inquisitorial retinue has been something that's been kind of lightly for quite a while now. It'd be pretty cool to see that realised for 40k. Overall, I'd certainly rate this as the single most interesting out of any of the Arks of Omen books. We might not have got our answers for literally everything, but it certainly felt like it had a bit more plot in it than the other 4 books combined, really. The first one was mainly setup, the Angron and Farsight ones were more kind of set pieces and their own self-contained little stories, and the Vashtorr one was an initial conflict but nothing really changed. Overall, it winds up as a fairly big win for Chaos, but I'd argue that it's not really the conclusion of the story, it's just being set up for the next thing, really. Basically, Vashtorr and Abaddon have got an enormous great big webway generator, and at some point they might use it to try and find some super weapons, though I'm sure could cause some carnage whenever it turns up. Definitely has some fun potential for the future. I kind of wonder if we might learn a bit more about it if Games Workshop ever decides to release some Dark Mechanicum models. Otherwise, it does seem like that Angron fight was kind of predictable. At least he got to have a fair bit of fun carving through a whole bunch of Dark Angels and Blood Angels, but then getting over angry and overreaching himself is probably kind of his thing. Perhaps not too surprising as well that the Lion beats him rather than the other way around, if Angron can basically never really die, whereas if he kills the Lion then that's it, and everyone's a bit disappointed about not being able to use their new model in current 40k again. Again, I think it was maybe a little bit disappointing that we didn't really learn about why Lionel Johnson actually came back. Hopefully there might be a little bit more details as to that in the novel book as to why he's up and about, but I could still see it being kind of possible they just say that he's been around for a while, just on the down low, and people haven't been noticing him. There was also a bit of a lack of Fallen in this book besides the redeemed ones that the Lion's leading. Looks like we're not getting any progression as to Luther or Cypher or anything. Again, might be in the other book, might not. In any case, let me know what you think of the overall story. Did it live up to your expectations or not? I do think in general it was quite fun. A Primarch returning, Dark Angel secrets getting a bit out of hand, and Vashtorr succeeding in reuniting relics where others have failed, plus putting Caliban back together, cause why not? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I do tend to focus more on game things, but every so often it's interesting to delve into the latest lore. I'll probably be keeping a fair few more of these coming, as to any other major updates for 10th edition. Finally, if you've been enjoying the videos on the channel and you'd like to help support, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked down in the video description below if you'd like to help keep these coming. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.